Okay, so I'm just going to give a very brief introduction and then all of you can introduce yourself briefly since there are three of you here, so it won't take a lot of time. Okay, and so what we're going to try and do in these sessions is talk about some very disruptive and big ideas. Okay, so and these are ideas which will make the world better. So impact the world, right? Like, so you could have a startup idea which has nothing to do with impact. Okay, these days it's kind of rare because of ESG, this, the other. Everybody is talking about impact. But what we want to try and focus on is, so if you take companies like Google, or you take companies like PayPal, or to a lesser extent, maybe companies like Airbnb and so on and so forth, they, impact a lot of people. And there's this whole talk about democratization, right? So my thought is, especially with the newer technologies coming in, that we can create very profitable companies which help individuals, maybe businesses, so there's no segment of customers that is left out necessarily. And so you're making small amounts of money from very large amount of people. And that can create a very large company, right? So suppose you want to make $1 billion of revenue, right? Of course, if you're going to make $1 trillion company, then you'll have to make more than $1 billion of revenue, right? You probably have to make closer to 100 billion. Like, I think Microsoft is 62 billion in revenue, and it is $1 trillion company. So somewhere around that range, right? And you'll have to be growing. And people have to be excited about you to give you the kind of market cap. Of course, $1 trillion, say 20 years later, is not going to be the same. I mean, it's more like 250 billion right now. But anyway, it doesn't matter, trillion, 250 billion, whatever. The idea is that you want to, so if you serve a lot of people, right? So if there are 8 billion people in the world, right? Now, technically, your product could serve everybody, including a child, a baby, whatever. Like, so for instance, in India, mutual fund, even a baby can open a mutual fund, sponsored, of course, by their guardian, right? So the target market for mutual funds is almost every human, who has the capacity. And in India, it's like 10 rupees a month is what you have to save to do what is called an SIP, a systematic investment plan in mutual funds, right? So 10 rupees a month, even somebody who's on the dole, or maybe even a beggar, right, can actually save 10 rupees a month. So I'm just giving you an idea that, in a sense, nobody is excluded, right, in this kind of product. So your addressable market is, if the world's population is 8 billion, then you have 8 billion, right? Now, if you can serve all the 8 billion, which is the market, and let's say the market, so there's a term called average revenue per user, ARPU, which is quite popular in India, right? I don't know if it's popular in the world, but in India, they keep talking about ARPU, especially in the telecom companies. Okay, so in this, suppose your ARPU is, say, $10 a year, as low as that, right? Then you've got an $80 billion market. If you make it like $100 a year, okay, then you have a 800 billion revenue market every year, right? So keep this in mind. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing a healthcare company, an agri company, a fintech company, education company, whatever. So the whole idea is to think whether one can serve a lot of people and make some revenue from that, and obviously control the costs, right? Because if you're going to make $10 ARPU and spend $20, then it's not going to work, right? And that's where kind of technology comes in, because it helps you control costs and serve a lot of people. Right? So in the beginning, so I was one of the early people who thought about the payment disruption idea, which ultimately became PayPal, or PayPal became the dominant player in that space. Okay, so at that time, I had a lot of knowledge about the funds transfer space because I had been working for a very long time in Citibank, and I used to head globally strategy and quality for banks who had dollar accounts with Citibank and were using those dollar accounts to transfer money. So that would be like a person transferring money from Thailand to Mexico and so on and so forth, or whatever, right? So I knew how complicated that whole process was, and I felt that that process could be simpler. And to me, the key thing was there was a globally unique ID, which was the email ID, and using that and the internet, I saw that we could really disrupt and transform payments. Okay, so it's a very simple idea, but executing it is difficult. Like 70 companies tried to do what PayPal did and 69 failed, right, at that time. But, it pays off rich dividends. And so there is a little bit of method that was used at that time. And then I've also done a few other things in the past before I did PayPal for Citibank. So right back in 1985, I led a business which got like 96% market share in the top 300 companies in cash management. And Citibank had only was in only 4 cities with 6 branches. But we did partnerships and things like that, and we moved money from all over the India. And we moved about 5% of India's GDP through Citibank. And similarly, in Thailand, later I went to Thailand, we got 36% market share from 1% in custodial services, right? So I think my experience has sort of taught me that, if there is an inflection point, there is some pain which we think we can solve, and then we work systematically, we can make a huge impact. And it's fun and it's profitable. Of course, there are lots of challenges. You need a lot of luck. You need the right team, etc., etc. Right? Now, as it happened, I didn't found PayPal. I mean, I wasn't like one of the but I joined PayPal very early and had a reasonable amount of stock options. No, actually bought stock. It was called restricted stock. And at one point, if I held on to all my stock, my PayPal stock was worth $200 million US, right? So you don't necessarily have to found a company, right? You can also join a company. Of course, it's much better if you found a company because people like Elon, Peter Thiel, etc., they made a lot more, right? And there. Okay, so with this introduction, I'm just going to pass it on to, yeah, so what I am saying is that I have said that, look, I will make myself available on these Thursdays for an hour and a half. And we'll carry on even if very few people are interested, because here it's a question of interest and quality rather than quantity, because very few people are necessarily interested in trying to think very big, and even fewer people will actually succeed in doing this, but that's okay, right? So this is more a game of quality, not quantity. And any of you at any point in time are free to drop off you can talk to people and also try and get them to join these sessions, which is why I'm recording them, so that then they can look at the recording and we don't have to repeat, right? But don't stress too much, right? In trying to get people and convince them, hey, you should join, kind of thing, because this has to come from within in some ways, right? So if they want to join, they're welcome. If they don't, and then if these sessions prove to be non-productive, we'll stop them. So it's a very low effort, possibly very high benefit kind of activity. So I anyway enjoy this. So, that's the background as to why I am starting these kind of sessions. Okay. So that I'll pass it on to Girish, and then we can have Raj and then Swaroop give a little bit of an introduction as to who they are, why they wanted to explore joining these sessions, and what they hope to get out of them.
Hello, guys.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Yeah. They're a little soft, I think.
Am I better now?
Yeah.
So I'm Girish. I'm fourth year economics student here at IIT Bombay. So my work is based on finance and credit default risk analysis. So prior to this, I've been very passionate about startups, and prior to this, I've worked in a biomedical space trying to create a physiotherapy device. Worked in the space of augmented reality and virtual reality. I have a patent application for over this summer, couple of years back. So I've tried my hands in multiple things, and with economics background, I slowly have drifted towards finance, and especially towards credit and credit analysis. So I met Sanjay sir in our department when he had come for a talk and was very interested in the topics he had brought up, and I've been exploring them since. So I'm a passionate learner, and I read up a lot of things. So I'm exploring and see where this goes. Thank you.
Okay. Raj, you want to take one?
Yes, sure. Yeah. My name is Rajshekhar, and I'm from Andhra, originally, and currently I live in Netherlands, Amsterdam, for about 8 years now. And I work in banking space too, and mostly credit risk. Surprising, but yeah, I work in ABN AMRO, one of the biggest bank in Europe, and I also worked in some small and medium banks. So that gave me an exposure of how banks work at every scale, and it's completely different, and it's transformational to understand. A job that one person do in a small bank has been done by like 400 people in a big bank in the same credit risk area, and I have experienced all the things there. And it's been 10 years, and I always had my quest to do something different and something on my own. And I recently joined my MBA from Amsterdam Business School, yeah, to explore more entrepreneurial side of me. And eventually I want to come back to India and start something on my own. So that's where this whole thought process of exploring what ideas are there out, and also validating my ideas, all this become a daily routine for me. And yeah, so hence my interest towards these sessions. Thank you very much for organizing, Sanjay and Girish. Yeah. And yeah, looking forward. This is me.
Okay, I think it's me next. Yeah. So yeah, as Raj said, I have a similar interest in trying to explore ideas. So thanks, Girish and Sanjay for organizing this. I too hail from Andhra, coincidentally. There's a bit of a linkage going on from one to the other here. But I don't come from a credit or finance background, though I have studied finance as a part of my MBA. I started my career as an engineer. I work with companies like Infosys and Siemens. Currently, I'm working with Schneider Electric, based in Singapore, in the corporate HR team, mostly working on strategy and a bit of workforce of the future kind of a projects, which is mostly into the how companies work with gig workers and things like that. So I've been trying to curate experiences that interest me, and I've been using these organizations as vehicles for me, which has been working out well. And as I started saying at the initial part of the call, I've been connected to Sanjay sir, and I've been calling. I've been like staying in touch with him. Just on the LinkedIn, following his updates, and I also see that he's wearing the SpaceX T-shirt, because I do
Yes.
when you took up the brief stint. Looking forward to actually learning more and see if I can contribute to the discussions, just out of intellectual curiosity, and also for the sheer passion to contribute and see if my ideas also can make any impact. That's more than anything else. That's primarily the reason for me. At this point in time, I do not have any entrepreneurial interest to get into. At the same time, if time takes me there, I'm generally open to any possibilities.
Sure. So that's wonderful. So, actually, so you brought up a very interesting point, and I'm very glad that you have joined the group. Because, you don't necessarily have to have an entrepreneurial interest. Because I think all of us have an interest in making the world better, right? For whatever. I mean, like, I would have probably the least interest because I would probably have the least amount of time left to spend in this world, but that doesn't matter. I do have an interest, and if you believe in sort of Hindu philosophy, then you might come back, whatever it is, right? Forget that. So that's not really a thing. So, if one looks at ideas, right, and helps improve them, and comments on them very frankly, and say, hey, this will not work, or then it really helps the entrepreneur, somebody who's trying to do that idea. And then at some stage, right, because people are at different stages, initially an entrepreneur who's very, very small will not have the bandwidth to set up all the functions that you need in a large company. But when we're talking about $1 trillion thing, then they're going to have and people can join at different stages if they want to, it interests them, etc., etc. And even if it doesn't interest them, they can help informally, maybe even, if there's like a friends and family type of round, then, participate and then take a very low kind of risk. Because incidentally, the PayPal shares that I bought, I had only invested $10,000 and they became so huge, right? So so that's the kind of thing that, okay, so what we're going to do is that we're going to move in a very structured way and very crisp initially. So I thought that I'll share my screen and I will just share a presentation that I had done when I was country head for Starlink. And that was basically trying to show how, say, that if you use the power of the internet, like broadband, how you could take various ideas and make them quite big, right? So since we're talking about big ideas, so I thought that might be a good place to start to stimulate the mind. After we finish that, and we'll just kind of not spend too much time on each idea, but I just want you to, after I finish that, make some general comments about what you saw in that presentation. Did something excite you, or whatever? And then we'll move to a very specific thing that Girish is exploring at this particular point in time, which is this credit disruption idea. So basically, I have a very strong gut feeling and that credit can be disrupted. Just like payments could be disrupted, so credit can be disrupted, right? So we'll take this as our initial thing, and this will take quite a few meetings, to really sort of flesh that out. If Girish is an entrepreneur who wants to do this, he may change his mind, he may actually do it, whatever, it doesn't matter. There may be some other people who join the group who want to do it. That's fine, because ideas are worth nothing. It's like really execution which matters, right? So this whole idea of being very stealth and and all that, I don't really buy it. Okay, it's like, okay, at some point in time you're going to introduce your product. It's going to be small. People are going to see it. They can reverse engineer it. So you have to keep. Yeah, okay. You build some intellectual property, and there are lots of things there. You don't necessarily even need to patent it. Right, I actually invented something called the random deposit, which I had assigned to PayPal, of course, because I had to as part of my employment contract. They tried to get it patented. They didn't get it patented in the US. They got a patent in the EU. And now this thing is morphed into various forms like the OTP, right? So it's very, very widely used, in there. So if PayPal could have even extracted like 1 cent or something for every OTP that is done or every random deposit that's done, it would make a huge amount of money, right? But it can't, right? So sometimes all this patent and enforcing it and all that becomes quite thing. But PayPal used that idea and many other ideas to become huge, right? So those are the kind of things that we'll start looking at. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let me find that. Okay. So this is this thing, 10 use cases for a resurgent India, and this was done in January of 2022. Okay. So these are some starting points to provoke thinking. Okay. So I'm not going to read all this, but the thing is, you get the idea. So I'd like you to look at the headline. So the first is preventive healthcare for every Indian. So what are the catalysts? So I have this hypothesis that almost any geographical area, if it has energy, if it has water, it has logistics like transport, etc., and it has broadband, then these are the 4 essential ingredients where you can use these to develop that area. And by development, I don't just mean GDP, I mean, all the SDG indicators also, right? So you have, so here, because I was trying to show that broadband is going to be a catalyst, okay? So like these are the 4 catalysts, right? Energy, water, logistics, and broadband. Now, if you look at something like Las Vegas, okay, it was a desert, right? But you got water from the Hoover Dam, you got energy, electricity, or whatever, right? And well, there was no internet at that time, but you had logistics. So you built roads, you built a strip, and so on and so forth. And then by using creativity, you made Las Vegas like a big center, right? Where there was nothing earlier, right? So that's just like one example. So like if you were talking in an Indian context, you could have like Thar Desert, okay? And if you could figure out some way of getting these ingredients there and there was an entrepreneur, then even a place like Thar Desert could become very productive, right? Okay, so there's a catalyst. So solution. So the solution is a healthcare platform, health data on every individual. Every Indian takes steps that prevent poor health outcomes, right? So right now, because of family history, I had to take statins. Maybe the statins caused me to become diabetic. So I'm a controlled diabetic, very low level. I mean, I don't take insulin or anything like that, but I do take some medication and statins and things like that. Now, had I known earlier in my childhood that I need to cut on carbs and, have higher proteins and maybe cut down on sugar, maybe I would not be diabetic, right? So that's why preventive healthcare and diagnostic tests with immediate results and action based on results, right? So India, for instance, is called the TB capital of the world. Right. So how do you prevent all this rather than treat it? So the nudge is motivational communication to make every Indian understand the importance of preventive healthcare. And then you have some measurable time-bound real outcomes. So tangible improvements in key health metrics, right? So this is preventive healthcare. Then there is telemedicine. Then there are multi-purpose centers. Okay. Courts with robust connectivity, broadband in every school, okay, a cheap credit for every aspirational India. So this is the one that we will discuss more about, okay. And then there's universal e-commerce, jobs for rural youth, tourism and ecotourism, double agri, dairy, pisciculture, pink revolution, GDP, and so on and so forth, right? So these were just sort of 10 use cases. Are there 10? I had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, 10. Okay. So these were 10, but actually there are many more, right, that you can think of. Right. So the main reason I kind of showed you this, and Girish has this link, so you can share it with you all if you want. But the whole idea I wanted to show is that there is a lot of pain in the world, right? And if you can solve that pain, you can build a very large impact company. So there are two kinds of companies, one are what we can call vitamin companies. They try to do something cheaper, faster, better. And then there are the painkiller companies which try to remove pain. Right? So big impact companies kind of fall into the painkiller category, right? That you're going to disrupt something. You're trying to think something totally new, right? In there. And chances are that if you are thinking about something new, because there's so many people in the world and so many, it's not necessary that you are the only person thinking about this. Because if you're the only person thinking about it, then maybe there's a problem, right? So you want to be able to research your space and all that, and then you'll find whatever you get interested in, that you will find a lot of things which are happening. And if you go very deep into it and see what is the unique insight that you have, which will make you better than the others, okay, and how will you connect all the dots, then you will be successful. So in the case of PayPal, for instance, a very diverse set of individuals with very different talents and skills came together And they were able to, so someone knew the internet very well, someone knew the back end and how it worked very well, like a person like me. Then there were others who had good communication skills, good design skills. Obviously, HR was very important because that is the key. How do you recruit great talent? How do you motivate them? How do you keep them engaged? And so on and so forth. So, all those kind of things come in, right? Okay, so this is what, so I'll stop here and stop sharing, and then we will take comments on all this and any questions that you might have. Because at this point, I think what I would like each of you to understand is that what is really a $1 trillion impact company that we are talking about? Is this just a pipe dream, or is it something that can be done? And are there opportunities for people to work on, right? So let's have a discussion on that. If you went into a random room and talked about it, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who disagree, a lot of people who might agree mildly, some might agree wholeheartedly, etc., etc. So let's have a discussion on that and come to hopefully the consensus that yes, this is possible. Okay, but let's not assume that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and yeah, just you can all unmute. We can have an open discussion. So who wants to start off?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about your presentation itself, Sanjay. So in the first slide of your presentation, you said, okay, preventive healthcare.
Yeah.
And Starlink can help India with preventive healthcare. So, preventive healthcare is kind of, it's still a lot untouched in India. Indians want to be reactive when it comes to healthcare.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's a fact. It shouldn't be like that, but unfortunately, that's a fact. And even if I think about my parents or my relatives, everybody, insurance is something which has started after me and my brother started working. And before that, before that, during my childhood, I don't even know what health insurance was.
Right.
And even today, after having the health insurance, my parents themselves don't go and take tests, blood tests or whatever health tests to be in control of their health. And it took me 5 to 6 years to convince my father that it is good to have health tests done at this age every year. Now, how can you change people in India to
their mindset, right?
Their mindset basically towards this? Because end of the day, you have to spend some 500 or let's say $1,000 or $2,000 to get this a test done or have that preventive attitude or mindset. And it's like they only think, okay, spending €2,000 is worth nothing.
Yeah.
But it is worth something. You have to tell the result, or you have to show that it is important, and you have to prove that the outcome is good. And how to change how do you change this mindset of people, and how do you make a company in this space?
Yeah.
Or using you're using Starlink as as a possibility.
Catalyst. No, Starlink is just a catalyst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe irrespective of Starlink or not, like, how do you think this space has? I understand we have different ideas, but this is something which is always in my mind. I start with problems.
Sure. No,
I see what are problems.
Yeah, that's a great question. Does anyone want to respond to this? Then I'll respond.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. I want probably not like generalize all Indians are like that. And when I take, I think probably at a period of time where we are right now, there will be pockets of people who will be ready, and we need to look at who they are. I'm not talking about the India, Bharat, and rural, and urban and all, but in terms of the maturity and evolution of how they see healthcare for various reasons, because India is so huge, we'll always have a ripe set of people for something like that. Because, for example, Raj, and there are many Raj like that who are there, and even if you just look at such families, probably it will be in millions easily. So, preventive healthcare, if we see who are ripe, who are closer to being open to such ideas, and really are looking for proper solutions that can help them to take care of themselves and their families. I think it's not like too difficult to also target and segment those population, and we don't have to do the large work of shifting the mindset of people, because it has already been happening for some time. And when I'm saying it's been happening, at least in the last probably with several state governments and central governments trying to bring up uh, uh, like whatever, they give different names to those policies, but they know that their expenses towards healthcare is borne by government. So you need to just approach and work towards in a way that is more structurally easier for anybody to crack on such solution, rather than thinking about how difficult it is to change the mindset of so many people. We don't have to help everyone to understand the benefit of it right now. If we just look at those levers that can help us to kind of make the shift, that I would rather look at it that way.
Sure. Okay, Girish, what are your comments?
So just to summarize Swarup's thoughts, it's like don't concentrate on what's not possible, but concentrate on people who are willing to make a shift.
Yeah,
So
so
that's
this is the concept of the early adopters type of thing.
yeah. So that's where you can start a business and eventually it will increase. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's a very good book on this by, so I forget the name of the author, but it's called Crossing the Chasm.
Yeah.
Which is like Silicon Valley kind of thing. You know, you first focus on the early adopters, put a beachhead in place, and then you can move on into making it mainstream. Yeah. So that's why Crossing the Chasm. Okay. Anyway, well, yeah, Girish, you want to come in?
My first thought with respect to preventive healthcare was how the key metrics would change. Like the key metrics would take a really long time before it actually showed some significant improvement. So, if a person is taking such preventive healthcare measures, and he can see the impact of it after a very long duration of time, he's much less incentivized to take it. So, when I saw that point, I came to the conclusion like things have to be solved in a very salient way, because these problems are as simple as they look like. Dealing with people and having a salient solution which can be adopted by a large number of people is important. So yeah, adoption is going to be hard in terms of this topic of preventive healthcare. But structuring a solution which can be salient with a lot number of people can adopt it very quickly, and it's being empowered by a group of people from the government to the individuals. So finding a way to do that would be this right step ahead.
So I'm going to hear, this is great, because I think this helps me illustrate a few points that I want to bring up in the way you can think about these problems, which you can apply to almost any problem. So this is the concept of first principle thinking. You heard Elon Musk talk quite a bit about first principles, thinking from first principle. So the first question is that if you were able to solve this problem, right? So if you were able to have preventive healthcare increase, right, by magic, okay, would this create a huge impact, right? And at least my answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
right? Because we spend so much on trying to cure a person, but we spend very little time in trying to prevent that disease from happening, right? So that is one, saying, okay, I now want to work on this problem, right? Because it's going to have a huge impact, right? And I'm going to like focus my thing on preventive healthcare. How do I make this happen? And what is stopping it from happening? What is the key problem that I need to solve, right? And how can I make this global, right? Not only India, right? Because preventive healthcare is not an Indian problem.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Right?
Mm.
So is everyone in agreement so far?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, the other thing I need to try and identify. So let's take an example like SpaceX, right? So what was the first principle insight in something like SpaceX? The insight was that space travel
Hmm.
cannot be viable unless you make rockets reusable.
Reusable.
Right? Now, it's a very simple concept, but I remember discussing this with Elon in 2005. Okay. Right? Now, his thing was, okay, that's understood. But he said that, look, I think I can solve this problem. Now, why did he think he can solve this problem? One, he comes from a physics domain, so he kind of understands the problem. But there are lots of patents which people in NASA have worked on, which are now in the public domain in 2005. So he says, like, look, I can go through all those patents and I don't have to start from ground zero, right? Because there may be lots of frustrated people who actually had thought about this really well. Now I can build a team by recruiting some of them, right? And actually making it happen. Now it took really long for him to do it. And almost SpaceX failed, right? If you go through the history of it, right? So now let's see that from that experience of first principle thinking, and what is the thing that we can bring maybe to the preventive healthcare space. Now, I'm not a preventive healthcare expert, so and none of us are doctors or in the healthcare space. So we may be talking outside our domain, and domain is kind of important. But yes, we can think about this, and so if you think about it and see who are the stakeholders involved in this. So clearly the governments are a stakeholder because they have to take care of their citizens, and if they were able to prevent chronic illness, then the amount of stuff that they have to spend on healthcare will reduce, right? So the governments are one. The healthcare companies or health insurance companies are another, right? If I'm paying a premium, and actually, when you start looking at and I'll leave this as an exercise with you guys to find out, but there's a TED talk by somebody, I forget the name, who basically says that we should pay doctors to prevent illness rather than cure illness, right? Now, this is a new lens. It's totally new way of thinking, right? So let's say I took a pool of people and I said, you are the doctor who's responsible for this. You will get a premium, like you will get a payment, which will go into a pool. And if people get ill, money will be taken out from that pool. Okay. But if they don't get ill, you can keep the money. Right? So currently, insurance pays when you get ill. Right? Can it pay when you don't get ill? Okay. Right? And of course, now lots of details, we won't get into that because we cannot, I mean, we can spend forever talking about this. But there is a new lens, a new way of looking at things. Now, I think Rajshekhar made an interesting point as to, changing mindsets, getting people to pay for tests, who will pay for the tests, etc. But let's say a simple intervention which doesn't cost anything, using technology and this. So, for instance, suppose you start exercising and doing yoga, right? And more people get motivated to do exercise and yoga, right? And there are things which you can spread through messaging, through whatever, right? So like people go to temple and pray. That is an ingrained behavior, right? Like for whatever. So now the question is, can you use communication skills, motivational skills, etc., etc.? So now with technology, it's become so much easier, right? Because if you want to make a message in Kannada, in Telugu, in Hindi, in English, and whatever, you can do it, right? Maybe you can use AI or whatever it is, right? And you can get some messages, right? Then this brings us to another interesting question. Let's say, suppose you were able to raise money saying, I'm going to solve this preventive healthcare problem globally, right? And let's say you were able to raise 100 crores. So this is another interesting topic, right? How do you raise money, right? And how do you convince people that you're going to be, how do you make a deck or talk to people where they are able to give you money? But let's say again, by magic, suppose there's an entrepreneur who has raised like 100 crores of capital. Okay. And they've said, okay, I'm going to be able to convince people that I'm going to be working on this problem. Now, let's say that they manage to convince the chief minister. I'm taking an Indian case, but it could be Ecuador, it could be Guatemala, it could be any place, right? So some person in a reasonable large geographic area who has this thing saying that, look, what I want from you is I want you to, I'll tell you what my solution is. I think it's going to get you really good outcomes. I will give you a performance guarantee for these outcomes, right? How they will be measured will be separate. Like, so if the thing is that there are more people doing yoga, exercise, etc., it can be measured in some sort of fashion, right? Like one can build a measurement kind of tool. Then the thing is, if you say exercise is one, then diet is another thing, right? So if there are things which show you, so there's something called CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, which is a device, right? So you put that device on your arm, and then every 10, 15 minutes, you can get your glucose level, right? Without doing a blood test. Now, this device is like exceedingly, it's fairly costly, right? So you can't give this device to everybody, right? But if you said that I did this controlled experiment, okay, with a certain number of people, and these are the kind of just Sunil, I'm in a meeting. Yeah, I'll call you later, or we'll talk later. Bye. Okay, so so what I'm trying to say here is that now, let's say that I showed people with a, like people watch a movie, right? They watch a serial, they watch something. Now here I'm able to show people that here's what happened. This person put this thing, had a gulab jamun, right? Boom, the sugar spiked, right? Had something else, right? Combined a little bit of protein with this thing, what happens to your sugar levels, right? So now the people don't need to wear this device, right? So now you've changed the whole thing. So if you wanted to prevent diabetes, for instance, you've done it in a very unique way, right? No tests, right? But you've done an intervention. See, suppose now you go and you get a test and you say, I have high blood sugar, my HbA1c is wrong, blah, blah, blah. Then you start treatment, you take metformin, you do this, that, and the other. But what if you don't reach that point, right? Because you control your diet without having to this thing. Now, let's talk about mental health. Very few people talk about, when we're saying preventive healthcare, we're also talking about mental health, right? So how do you work in the area of mental health, right? Like a lot of people blame technology for problems relating to mental health, right? How do you reverse that lens, right? Now, who are the people who will pay for this, right? Maybe the consumer, the rich consumer. That may subsidize the poor consumer. The poor consumer, the governments might pay. The insurance companies might pay, right? So we're not trying to solve this problem, right? So we won't get deep into it. But what I'm trying to illustrate to you is that whenever you are looking at a problem, okay, you can look at it with a different lens. And that is the crux of disruptive thinking. Okay. Yeah. Sarup, you had a question.
Yeah, so I just want to share an observation that I had, and basically building on from what you shared about how Elon Musk looked at the problem of SpaceX and built on what has already been done. And when I look at when you're actually presenting those 10 ideas, it did occur to me that because I know for the fact that in some of the topics, there are some companies who are already working. Say, for example, when you said e-commerce for all, the first company that comes to my mind is Meesho. So Meesho is actually disrupting e-commerce by taking it to a rural India and enabling rural sellers to have a platform that is fair and open for them, unlike probably the Amazons of the world, which has its own constraints. So I don't know enough about Meesho versus Amazon, but I'm just trying to build on the idea that Elon Musk demonstrated. And even when you say CGD, there is another company that I can think of, the Ultra Human. I don't know if you have used or if you have heard of any people using the same device. It's actually, I have a couple of friends who in India and Bangalore started using it to have the chip, and then it kind of gives the details of the glucose and entire health reports and all of that. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is that in any of these ideas, at least when I see on the face of it, probably they are approaching it in different ways, but you probably consider it that, okay, there's someone who's already doing some work. If we zoom into any of it, why don't we like really study them and understand why they have not been able to succeed, or why they have been able to succeed, and to what extent, and to what is the gap that is still left for anybody else to go into the market and capture. That's just another thought.
Sure, that's great. And I'm now also going to introduce a few other elements, and I want your reactions to those. Okay. So I have this hypothesis that what is so let's say that not everybody can become a Sachin Tendulkar, right? You can play cricket, right? Or a Virat Kohli or whatever, right? So not everybody can become an Elon Musk, right? So there is a special kind of skill, right? Now, maybe one of you can become an Elon Musk. Okay, I don't know, the next Elon Musk, which is what I'm trying to inspire in some ways. Or you can join an Elon Musk or whatever. But so let's take a geographic area which wants to develop, right? Which wants this preventive healthcare solution solved, right? Now, why will a world-class entrepreneur come to this geographic area? Because he has the whole world to choose from. So how can you attract a world-class entrepreneur to come to your geography and solve the problem? Right? Now, you can say that, in India, no leader or politician or, whatever it is, or bureaucrats and all that, they're not interested, right? They don't want necessarily the areas to develop. But that's not very true, right? Because if you look at history, the person called Sharad Pawar in Maharashtra, I don't know that much about other politicians, but I came across this example, so I'm giving you this. So when he was very young, he, I think, was the MLA of Baramati, his constituency. And he actually gained a name for himself by developing Baramati. Okay. And then he became the chief minister. Now, later on, he's supposed to be not necessarily all, accused of many wrong things and all that, but whatever, that's another story. But what I'm trying to say is that there is a big win for, say, an MP today. Like now we are going to have the elections, right? So some out of the 543 MPs, maybe there's one MP, who says, okay, I want to do this in a different way and I don't want to spend money, right? Because here's the other interesting thing, that for me, if I'm trying to build a world-class company, which is $1 trillion company, what is the most critical thing? So one, I need critical mass, right? I need a large number of users, right? So if you take something like Jan Dhan, Prime Minister Modi said everybody has to have a Jan Dhan account, right? So everybody had a Jan Dhan account, right? But if you take somebody like Paytm, and today last night there was some draconian news on Paytm. I think the stock's going to really tank, and I'm very interested in what happens. But I looked at the RBI press release, and it seems that they told them in March of 2022, and these guys did nothing, right? And then they sort of closed them down. So everybody's up in arms saying, what the shit, does India want fintech and all? But I think that's a wrong reaction. I mean, I don't know what Paytm did in there and what the outcome.
They didn't do anything. That is the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't do that, right? I mean, like there is a regulator. I mean, you got to work within the law, right? I mean, otherwise they will shut you down, which they probably did, and whatever. So, but how much did Paytm spend on acquiring customers, right? So if you were the chief minister, or you were an MP, or you were the MLA of a particular area, you have a large number of people. So this becomes a laboratory where a world-class company can test its solution, right? And if you tell them that I will give you a license, okay, after very careful, so you have to apply, but very quick, I'll tell you if you have some brilliant insights, ideas, are like if this person forms has a consulting company which helps them get these people, world-class entrepreneurs and all that. Say, I will give you a license. And by the way, because I'm giving you a lab, I'm not going to give you any money. I'm actually going to take 1% of your founder's equity, right? Because I'm giving you something so valuable, right? And the other thing is regulation, right? So when you dig into almost any space, Now, in the preventive healthcare space, there's been a regulation which prevents people from prescribing on the internet without seeing a patient physically. That regulation has recently been changed after COVID. Okay. But there are many regulatory barriers which prevent solutions from happening. Right? So, for instance, now suppose you had like a portable device which could take a chest X-ray, and that chest X-ray using artificial intelligence could be interpreted, and there may be some false positives and some, things like that. But if this could be then used, and if a person shows early signs of, say, tuberculosis or whatever, then there was a treatment protocol that could be initiated, right? Now, this may sound all okay, but are there some regulations which stop this, right? So often you run into these regulatory roadblocks. So if a person who's like an MLA or an MP or whatever, they can work with the regulators to help you bypass these regulatory roadblocks and give you critical mass, how valuable is that for a world-class entrepreneur? So that's my question to you. And so I'm just going to sort of give an answer that it's extremely valuable, right? Does anybody disagree with that? If that, raise your hand kind of thing. Okay. So now you got this thing of how broken the system is, right? So if you take the state of Haryana, they will issue a tender to build a municipal system, right? People will apply. The state of Haryana will pay money. Then the thing will not necessarily work. Then the state of Rajasthan will do the same thing. Then the state of Andhra Pradesh will do the same thing. Then Telangana will do it. So how much money is kind of wasted? Now, if the state wanted to own the intellectual property of this platform, whatever is being developed, and then wanted to market it, right? Then it makes sense for the state to pay now. But if there's an entrepreneur who wants to own the platform and says, I will develop this platform for you, I just want you to use it, critical mass, right? And pay per use, right? So I don't charge the state anything. So let's take another idea before we get into this credit idea, which is, so I think barring Swaroop, the others are familiar with banking, right? So you know that most banks use a core banking system, right? So there are people like Finacle and iFlex and people who've made a core banking system, right? So every bank doesn't have to develop their own banking system; they customize the system. So the core banking system takes care of basic stuff, right? But now there are so many municipalities in the world, right? Can you make a core municipal system? Okay, using the latest technologies, right? And you don't charge the municipality. Municipality is free, right? You charge the user. Now, every user needs a birth certificate, they need a death certificate, they need to pay property tax, they need to do this, etc. So you just charge a convenience fee to the guy, right? So to me, this core municipal system type of thing seems like $1 trillion impact idea. Now whether you use drones, you use AI, you use whatever, there's all, things. But the core problem that I'm solving is, yes, municipalities need a system. Gradually, a lot of people are going to get urbanized and they're going to live in areas which have municipalities. So somebody's going to take care of the sewage, someone's going to take care of, whatever, right? So this is the kind of thing that I want to leave you with to think about, and maybe we can even take that in the next session as to this whole thing of a geographic area is a stakeholder which can attract world-class companies, right? And say that, okay, I want this problem solved. I don't know how to solve. You are the experts, but if you give me proposals, and I can write some one-page thing or 1 or 2 page RFP, request for proposal type of thing. If you give me proposals within 30 days, we'll have a discussion, right? But not necessarily within 30, but we'll keep having a very proactive discussion with the idea that the first acceptable proposal, we will give you a license. Now, even if you're a startup which hasn't raised that 100 crores, if you have this kind of conditional license from a geography, okay, raising 100 crores is very easy, right? So, now one can say that, trying to convince a geography, etc., get a license, etc., is very difficult. Yes, no doubt. But if you don't solve a difficult problem, you will never build a $1 trillion company. Okay, so if you're just going to solve small problems, you're not going to build a $1 trillion company, right? Well, everybody can solve small problems, right? Then what is it that you're doing different? Right? Then I'm just going to give you one more story here, which is how did Google get its first $1 million check? So the first $1 million check that it got was from a person called John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins, KPCB, Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield and Byers, right? So what they did was that they used Lego and whatever, and they built like a daisy chain of drives to demonstrate the efficacy of their search algorithm. Okay. And John Doerr was so impressed, he said, okay, here's a $1 million check. So the key is that now with different, like the advances in technology, like one person or two people, if you're a techie, all right, you can build a prototype. Even if you're not a techie, you can learn technology. It's not that hard anymore, right? So you can build a prototype which can help you get funding. So there are things like Village Global Capital. There's something called Antler. There are quite a few. Maybe there are others who even talk about solo entrepreneurs, and you can sort of get funding from them if you want. But it also costs very little to build a prototype. So if you can't convince your friends and family and maybe your own resources to build prototypes, then if you can't raise, say, suppose you need 2 lakh rupees, to build a prototype for an idea that can change the world, right? If you don't have 2 lakh rupees or you can't raise 2 lakh rupees, then what are you talking about? Right? How are you going to raise money to build a $1 trillion impact company, right? Okay. Okay. So I'll stop here for a little while, and I just want you all to each articulate what are your key takeaways so far. Girish, you want to start? Girish, you there?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, so understanding the opportunities in terms of having a critical mass where you're solving it for enough number of people, the importance of the regulatory framework to be aiding a person who's trying to solve something in a geographical location, because that's going to be, am I audible?
Yeah.
So the importance of how the government and the individual entrepreneur should go hand in hand to solve such major problems. So these were the main points which we had to deal with, and understanding of how we can, what kind of problems are the trillion-dollar problems which will be affecting the most number of people. And yeah, they are hard problems. You're gonna have to be deal with regulatory frameworks and building a diverse team so that you have multiple facets being addressed to. And technology shouldn't be a problem because of the current age where we have the ability to learn and get as much information we can at touch of a button. So main point.
Yeah. So Raj, you want to say something?
Yes, for me, yeah, I think it's about thinking. It's about as you said, the first principles approach, and out of box thinking, and that's kind of takeaways. This is the gist that I take from the whole topics that we have discussed about. Yeah,
Okay.
keeping it short.
And Sarup?
Yeah, I think probably a couple of the most important takeaways for me is one, to really be able to zoom into what you can truly commit and work on, because ideas are plenty, as you said, Sanjay, because you can come up with ideas, but idea is just an idea until you execute it. If you're really wanting to commit to something, you have to do a lot of deep work, obviously using first principle thinking and all. But what I really liked also from this session is how even someone like Elon Musk goes through the same to actually build on somebody who has already done the work and really identify the opportunity beyond those who have done the work and given up. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, because I don't think a lot of people do that. They just talk about ideas and they don't pick one and they don't do the deep work. This is from my personal experience of limited interactions with a lot of people who wants to do something, but they get stuck for some reasons. So that I think is the biggest takeaway for me, to really build on someone's work if you're really believing in that idea and committing to do the deep work, even if it is very difficult.
Yeah. So I think, to me, if you say like, okay, what's the first thing? So the first thing is that you've got to identify a problem that you are very passionate about, because that drives you, right? And without passion, there is nothing. Nobody, I mean, you can't work on my idea, right? You have to work on your idea. Now, you may listen to me and you may get an idea. That's a different thing, right? But it has got to become your passion, right? And you have to say that, okay, I'm going to dedicate my life to this, right? At least for the next few years, right? It takes long, right? So, and then it's like a kida, it's in your brain, right? I mean, then even when you're sleeping, you're thinking about this idea. When you're like eating, you're thinking about this idea. When you're like this thing, you're trying to do this thing. And I mean, like, even if you manage to get a friend, the friend gets bored of you because you're like constantly talking about your idea. Maybe your wife or whatever is saying, okay, stop, enough, right? So it becomes in some ways an all-consuming passion. And, a lot of people think that money is the driver. Money is not the driver. Money is the side effect. Solving the problem is the driver. You've got to be really passionate about what you're doing. And then you can't fake it, right? Because if you are really passionate, a person who's talking with you even for 10 minutes, will be able to make out whether you are faking it or you're really passionate, and do you have some dum or you don't have them, right? Because if you can't articulate your idea in, say, 10, 15 minutes or in a deck, then you don't know the idea well enough, right? Now, the next thing is that once you've identified and zeroed in on the idea that you're going to work on, like there's a story about Arjun and the eye of the fish, right? The eye arrow type of thing, right? So the guy doesn't see anything else, right? There's so many problems in the world, but the person is just focused on the eye of the fish, right? So that focus is very important, right? Then you've got to go in and go deep into this, become the most knowledgeable person. So if you look at preventive healthcare, this is not a new idea, right? It's been around for ages. People have thought about it. There are these videos, there this, but you got to learn everything about it, right? And then you become your own devil's advocate, right? And you work on, so you build a prototype, right? So it's not that hard to build a prototype. So I told Girish this, I don't know if he's done it or not, but so my son has this startup called Bharosa Club, right? Which they've been working on for a couple of years, right? And this is like in the advisory space. So you can become a member of Bharosa Club, just sign up and look at it. Now, just 2 people have built the entire tech stack, right? So they did raise a friends and family round of about 1 crore or something like that. And then, there's been a huge history in the past and all that. But what I'm saying is that they haven't spent very much because they don't take salaries, except his co-founder takes a small salary in there. So there is just 2 people, no tech team. They built an entire tech stack. Okay. They have paying customers, right? Now, they are not in a hurry. I keep trying to push them to try and, build a team because, I mean, I have enough capital. So I could actually, but I also won't fund it unless, I have a proper plan and all that kind of stuff. But I'm reluctant to fund it because, then it's easy way out, right? So you've got to convince others and all that kind of stuff. But they're also trying to say, why do we need funding? So there's a company like Zerodha, which you may have heard of, which has bootstrapped itself, but it's been very slow. So at some point in time, right, if you have a very big idea, you are very good at convincing people, then taking funding from the right people is not a bad idea, right? So those are the kind of things that you have to think about. So also, what is my aspiration, right? Between my son and, so this Bharosa Club was a company that I started. Now, I'm a very good product person, but I'm not a very good entrepreneur, and I'm quite old, right? So he took it over because he wanted to do something which was meaningful and stuff like that. And I said, fine, you take it over, but then I'm not going to interfere, right? For quite long, he was on his own. Then he managed to convince a co-founder. Then these people built something which didn't necessarily work. Then in January, they came back to me, January last year, and said, oh, now we want to try and build something big. Because I was saying, look, there's nothing wrong in building something small, right? But I can only add value if you're thinking like really big. whatever, right? So then they came to me, and I've been trying to help them on and off, back and forth. So we have many discussions, many disagreements, many things, whatever. But I'm very conscious that it's his company, he's running it. I'm just a coach, right? So I back off at many points in time, right? But the way I think is that, I like to look at, is there pain? Now, in the advisory market in India, okay, there is a lot of pain. In the advisory market in the world, there is a lot of pain. People are taken for a ride, right? So actually, this Saturday, I'm doing a session on securing your retirement, not like just a 20-minute, 30-minute session. Okay, because this is other pro bono stuff that I'm doing, where I've developed a set of templates, okay, which people who are interested can get these templates for free, and it'll help them with their personal finance, right? And then after this 30-minute introductory session, then there will be like 1.5-hour sessions on each template. Not necessarily the 8 templates, but some of them are very small, so we won't need like a 1.5-hour session. But some of these are like pretty complicated, and they're very they're not complicated, but very rich discussion can happen, right? So the advisory market is like going to be like 100,000 crores every year in India. So where is this 100,000 crores coming from? And I think we are just out of time now, so we won't have time to get into the credit disruption piece, but we can do that next week, right? So the 100,000 crores comes from basically 12,000 crores, which is paid as commission to mutual fund people. About 42,000 crores, which is paid as commission to insurance people. Okay, so that makes 54,000 crores. And 46,000 crores is commission on loans and other kind of things, right? So the Indian consumer is paying 100,000 crores every year. Now this number can reduce, so they can pay less, and they can get better advice, right? So it's a huge market to attack. And there are many players, and there are many vested interests and many regulations and all that. So anyway, we'll end today because we are at 8:30 almost. It took much longer than I anticipated, but hopefully this was a useful discussion, right? And, we will stop the recording. Okay, stop.